I'm Andrew Kitley, and this is my podcast, The Invisible Gift, a show about turning disability into possibility. From a young age, I was told I had a disability that would make it impossible for me to achieve and flourish in life. I struggled in school and felt I was not truly understood or supported. On my long road to becoming the owner of multiple businesses, I have learnt that dyslexia was not my disability, but rather my invisible gift. My dyslexia challenged me every day, but it was also what made me into an independent thinker, a creative, and gave me that hard-working mindset that has taught me to never be discouraged by failure. I realised there are many people out there just like me. So I wanted to learn more about them and dyslexia itself. I realised I needed a way to do this which was great for dyslexics, which obviously rules out writing anything down and makes total sense why a podcast is perfect. I'm excited to be sharing this journey with you as we learn more about dyslexia, the incredible people that thrive with it, and how we can all transform our greatest challenge into our invisible gift. Welcome to my podcast. I'm really excited to be joined on this episode of the podcast by Mirabel. Mirabel is a chemistry student at University College of London. She is just 21 years of age, but her story will sound amazing to most dyslexics. Even at university, Mirabel stands out with her academic grades, but it hasn't always been like that. Despite being told that she wouldn't be able to read till she was 11 and struggling in school, Mirabel has gone on to thrive. Her work ethic and her supportive family has shown what's possible for everyone with a neurodiversity. I met with Mirabel at a studio in London to record this episode. We spoke about her experiences growing up, the incredible lengths her mum went to make sure she had every opportunity to succeed, and the plans for the future to make sure dyslexia doesn't stand in her way. First off, as always, I wanted to know how she first discovered she had dyslexia. Right, so thank you for coming on the show. You're going to be the youngest person, for a while that we're going to talk to. So, how old are you?
21.
21. Still young.
Good number.
That's it. I'm jealous of that age. And you're a chemistry student.
Yeah.
What university did you go to?
UCL.
UCL. Nice. Okay. So this is a bit different because normally we're so far away from the academic people on this podcast, so it's quite interesting to get another side of it. Mm. So because you're quite young, obviously dyslexia has come a long way in years, and it'd be interesting from your point of view, how was it when you was younger? So when did you first find out you were dyslexic?
Well, I first was diagnosed. I was picked up a little bit earlier, but I got my first diagnosis when I was 5.
Wow.
Yeah. Because
5.
It was very obvious that my literacy was falling behind everyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even since then, even within my short lifespan, I've noticed a huge change in the perception and support that exists. And in terms of, how it affected that kind of first early stages, there's a lot of, frustration and stuff, but I always say it was character building.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to look at it.
Yeah.
So 5, I'm trying to think back. I'm 37. I don't feel like that's that old. But when I think back to what I was trying to do at 5, I don't even know. What did you do at 5 where you can kind of...
Well, I mean, I started having kind of dyslexia lessons every week. I think it's sometimes twice a week to try and catch up with where all my peers were at. So,
and did the schools provide that?
No, I have to admit school support was thin.
Yeah.
There was the thing is, you mainly come across, a few really good members of staff during education, but on the whole, there's kind of a lack of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So my mum found this brilliant lady. I think her name was Wendy Blanks. Sadly passed away recently. But I saw her every week, twice a week, until I was about 10. Mm-hmm. And we'd do all the kind of multisensory teaching. And my mum would spend like an hour or so after school doing homework with me, writing letters on my back or using magnetic foam letters and feeling them. Kind of all the kind of anything to make it less about looking at the line.
Yeah.
Because for me, even writing along a line, even with the lines on the page, my handwriting would slope upwards. So it was, it's not really, the kind of really traditional rote learning techniques didn't work for me. So my mum went away and researched, and she basically bought the whole course of books that you need to become a kind of dyslexia expert. And so, I didn't have much time to play. I did get, quite sad that I couldn't, just go off to the park with everyone else. But I don't regret any of the time spent, because it was an investment in my future. And, recently we've been clearing out some of my old toys. We've been throwing out stuff, trying to clear out during this kind of lockdown. And it's funny because some of them, I never really got time to play with because I was working really hard. But it means I don't, hard work isn't something I'm afraid of.
Oh. So your mum was a great support in that, and we briefly spoke before we started, and she sounds amazing. What was the things that you were great at when you were 5, and the things that you weren't so great at? Where were the areas where you knew there was a problem and the areas where you thrived? So
the thing that really made my mum realise that I wasn't just stupid, it wasn't just that, they're just not very bright, was the fact that I was so in love with all the David Attenborough programs. I knew everything about all of the animals, all of the dinosaurs. I'd be like, there's a video of me when I was little at Christmas opening my stocking, and I got some kind of schleich, what do you call them, plastic animal. I was like, oh, is this a camel or is it a dromedary? And I was a very precocious child. I had very good vocabulary because my parents would read to me, and I had a lot of audiobooks. So I obviously didn't have a problem with kind of thinking and expressing myself, but as soon as I had to write something down, it just didn't happen, and I'd get very frustrated. My motor skills were bad. I couldn't grip a pencil properly, and I still can't hold a knife and fork properly.
It's interesting because you said your vocabulary, you speak very well, and what's interesting with that, I'll tell you what my thoughts are. I speak really badly. I'll give you an example. When I first started work, I used to use the term Pacific instead of specific because I didn't know how to spell it. So I pronounce everything, because I can't spell a lot, I don't pronounce things properly. Now, there's also another side of it. I did start my career as a scaffolder. We are a bit rough and ready. I'm no longer a scaffolder, but we are quite rough and ready, and you kind of pick up the language. But you very well spoken and very articulate in the words you use, because instantly we only met for 5 minutes, 10 minutes now, and already I'm like, wow, you say words I'm impressed with. You said one a minute ago, precocious, and I was like, wow, where's that come from? But
I guess it's I always was very imaginative, and I really enjoyed kind of fantasy worlds, and books was something I really wanted to get into because my imagination, that was always one of my strongest suits as a child. I'm still quite imaginative, but I do think you lose a little bit as you get older, and you have to do, worry about the A-level exam or whatever.
Do you lose it, or do you get it beaten out of you?
Well, some people treasure the imagination, but other places don't seem to have space for it. But I think the thing is, I really enjoyed words, and I enjoyed languages, and I liked how things sounded. So I really love poetry. My granny would always read poetry to me with a lot of nonsense words, actually. And because my mum went and did all that research into phonics, I really was trained in how each sound looks, and how I had a kind of visual relationship with the sounds for my spelling. So a lot of my spelling is really good now. And I had stuff like mnemonics. So could, oh, you lovely duck, just to remember how to do it. And,
I still do that now.
Yeah, or eight Indians glug hot tea.
Yeah.
So I have lots of these mnemonics. But for some words, sometimes, like bureaucracy, I had to spell last week.
Wow.
I can't spell it.
No.
I had to check that. And at school, I was much more strict with myself. because I definitely had more exams where I had to be good at spelling, and it was part of the mark because I did Latin A-level, so I didn't drop any essay subjects. So when it came to university, I haven't had to do anything like that in chemistry. So I've definitely been less strict about when I come across a word I don't know. I used to always write it down in a little book and write it out 5 times and then try and review it so that I would always be expanding my vocabulary.
Out of interest, do you speak any other languages?
I wish.
It's a question that I've never asked anyone. And
I mean, I studied. The thing is, I find other languages really, really intriguing, but it's something that I have a real difficulty going from written to spoken. So the way I've always been taught languages has been as a written thing first, and I was meant to actually I was really good because I tackled, English almost as if it were a foreign language growing up. I was very good at written French at school. So, I was meant to be doing the GCSE a year early.
Wow.
Until they did an oral test with me. And I couldn't speak at all.
Right.
I couldn't translate what I knew I could write into something that I could speak. It was just a processing thing I just couldn't do. I got like 45%, 90% in all my written things and 45% in the oral. So I dropped it. And I was also doing Spanish, and that was a similar story. But because I was quite good at the written components, I really liked ancient languages. So I did Latin and ancient Greek at GCSE.
I always found Latin interesting.
Yeah.
And then my school dropped it, which was very upsetting.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed them because it was the bits I was good at. It's the kind of analysis of words and, the language was only written. I never had to speak it because no one speaks it now.
Yeah.
So that, and it was all stories. I loved the stories. The stories were really good. We didn't have to write an essay about, what do you do to help the environment? Like in a lot of modern languages you have to do. It was so, this war has been fought and, who's been murdered and all that kind of thing. It's much more exciting. So that really appealed to me. So I actually kept Latin up for A-level and no regrets, even though the workload did bring my overall grades lower because it was stretching me a bit. I don't regret it in terms of like what I've gained for it in my life. It was a real enriching experience.
Do you write a lot? Are you a creative writer?
I used to. That's one of the things that really kind of died off because I was working so hard when it came to kind of GCSEs and further on. It's embarrassing. They're still up there on the internet. I have many, many works of fiction on Wattpad, which was a little self-publishing website and I probably started creative writing as soon as I started to be good at reading, which was when I was about 8. When I was 8, I read my first chapter book, proper long story, and I think it was The Fish in Room 10 something. It was a mermaid book.
Yeah,
I became very into mermaids at that point, and I think I wrote more than like 11,000 words on my little laptop, which I had because I was allowed to bring my laptop in. For year 4, they said I was allowed to bring it into school to help.
Now
me.
You're making me feel old. Computers at school.
Well, it was, my family were very on it with the technology. My dad was one of the first to really get into the internet, and he was always pursuing the technology. But I've written so much, and it's so embarrassing because I thought, I'm never going to be embarrassed about this. I'm going to put my real name. So when you search for me, I didn't put a pen name. So when you search for me, it still comes up. Luckily, I've upped my public profile through other things. So I have my LinkedIn or I've commented on petitions. So that comes up first. But if you keep scrolling, it's all still there.
And if this podcast gets massive, everyone's going to know about it.
I know.
You never know. There might be a piece in the works. Could be.
I mean, the thing is, I had so many great ideas, but not enough time to write them. Because even though I found it difficult to write, I wanted to get it out. I really wanted to. And even at that point where I was getting better, I mean, even now I sometimes struggle. I'm really interested in science communication. And I did a tech journalism module last year. And even though I knew what I wanted to say, there was still a kind of barrier. But fortunately, since I've gone to university, I've had access to different technology. Like I have Dragon Naturally Speaking. So I just dictate and it writes down what I want. And
that's what I use as well.
Yeah, I mean, my dad has always used Dragon. He's not diagnosed as dyslexic, but I'm pretty sure he is.
Well, so dyslexia is hereditary, so it's kind of got to come from somewhere.
Exactly, and it's definitely not my mum.
Yeah, well, I say that about my parents.
Yeah.
It's so clearly my dad and not my mum.
Yeah.
It's crazy. He still can't pronounce V's, anything with V's in it.
Oh, no.
So if you ask them to say vodka, it'd go vodka or something. It's but it's not a speech impediment. It just can't get his head around V's.
Yeah.
And when I'd done a dyslexia test in my early 30s, I was right at the top of the dyslexia, and I thought, my dad's so much worse than me. He must be off the scale. As I say, it's funny. It's hereditary, and a lot of people don't actually know that. But it is. So how did because you're still relatively young, you can think back easier than I can. Did you find that dyslexia affected you in any other aspects of your life other than learning and stuff? So for me, I'll give you an example, and it could be affected in both good or bad ways. So for me, it was it boosted my confidence in a weird way because I had to, in order to I had to be more outgoing as a person in order to make up for my lack of kind of ability to do things. But in other areas as well, it made me less positive sometimes about my future. Did it affect you in any other ways?
So I think in terms of kind of social aspects, it's difficult because I'm also on the autistic spectrum to try and separate out, because I'm dyslexic, dyspraxic, and autistic. So kind of working out what's responsible for what is something that's really tricky. But one thing it did really give me a sense of was once I was assessed, I knew that I wasn't stupid. And that was something that was so important to me.
So when did you've got a few things, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and you're on the spectrum. When did they come up in your life compared to dyslexia?
So I'd say I was about 13 when the dyspraxia thing started to be kicked about. Because dyspraxia, I think, has to be an adult diagnosis. And
for the people listening, who do you think, I know what it is. Only just, though. I only found out a couple of weeks ago. What is dyspraxia? So
it's often just dismissed as the clumsiness syndrome. Yes. But there's a lot more going on than that. It's to do with kind of executive function and planning and how you join up stuff. So I had a real problem. I didn't know which sock to put on first. I was like, which is the right, which is the left? Which do I put on first? And I'd spend, hours before school. I'd just go, I don't know which sock to do. And my mum, until I was about 11, my mum was dressing me because I had such an issue with sequencing. And other kind of tasks like tying shoelaces. I still can't do the proper bunny round the hill thing. I have to do just 2 loops in a normal knot.
Do you find when someone points something like that makes you angry? Because my brother's ex-girlfriend once, now obviously I didn't get on with her in the first place, which is probably why I got so angry. I remember I'd done up my shoelaces and she said to me, and he wonders why I never didn't like her. She said, "You're so thick, you can't even do up your laces properly." And she was a teacher.
You see, if someone had said that to me, I would find it very hard not to lash out. I'm a very tolerant person. I think being a big sister makes you somewhat tolerant and patient. And I got a lot of my rage out when I was younger. I used to have tantrums after school because everything was so stressful. I'd spend about an hour with a tennis racket just whacking cushions.
That's really interesting because I got put into martial arts at 6, I think it was. I always get this age wrong. My mum will go, "No, you weren't, you was 13." But I think I was 6 because of my anger issues. And it did stem from my frustration, not with without not being able to do things, but mainly because I didn't feel like anyone understood me.
I grew up in Wimbledon, and there's a Buddhist temple quite near where I live, and we went on a school trip to visit it. And they told us this whole thing about how the Buddha said, why hold on to anger? It was said something about like it being a hot coal, and you're intending to throw it at your attacker, but you don't, and you just hold on to it, and it's just hurting you.
Yeah.
So you should just let go of it. And after that, it kind of shifted my whole mindset about anger. I mean, when I was younger, I'm like primary school, I would try to use it to fuel my working and say, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to do this and this.
Do you still do that now as an adult?
I do that less now because I'm happy with who I am. So I don't feel like I need to prove anything. But that's also because I've achieved so much that I wasn't supposed to.
So did them achievements come out of, because I do exactly the same and I still do it now. So my favourite thing, the worst thing you could do to me is challenge me. Because I've got like, I used to work in a business and had a business partner. Hopefully he won't listen to this podcast, but when I get burnt with something, when I feel that people have put me down or said I can't do something, I'm going all in. I'm going all in to prove them and everyone else how unbelievably wrong they are. And I have a lot of conversations with people, and a lot of people say to me, it's probably not the best way to be, but everything I do is to either prove to myself or prove other people wrong. It doesn't matter which one. And I love it when people say you can't. It's like a drive. It's unbelievable. I would say I actually go for it now more than anything. I want people to say, you can't do that. I actually have it. Do you know, my parents are really not supportive, but they are lovely. So my family's insanely laid back, and the reason why I am like I am as a person is because how laid back they are. So they're like, if you want to go do it, go do it. They have no judgments about anything. They're just like, go and do whatever you want, but they're not going to be the ones standing by me going, yeah, you can do it, right? Which I think has also helped me. I think we are products of our experiences. And I remember I was doing my first downgrading to get my black belt in karate, and this stems not just into martial arts, it also stems into all the dyslexia issues I went through. And I remember I come back and I failed it. I hyperventilated in the first 15 minutes and I had an adrenaline dump, which if you've never experienced it, it's one of the most horrendous thing ever. Your body becomes lead and you can pretty much not move. And everyone warned me that's what was going to happen before I'd done it. And everyone warned me not to hyperventilate. And I did. And I hyperventilated because when I walked in, 1 minute I've got all these friends there, and the next minute I'm walking in and I've got 12 black belts around the dojo just staring at me, all watching me. And most people do their downgradings in groups, so it's more comforting. And I remember anyway, I failed the downgrade and went home to tell my mum and dad, and they turned around and my mum said to me, bless her, she went, I don't know why you bothered putting yourself through it. Of all the worst things in the world that you could say to a child that wants just what I wanted her to go, you do it next time. And now I look back as an adult, I realise that's what I needed. That was my strength, because I knew I was going to do everything on my own. And so what with your anger, apart from hitting cushions, how did you channel that into, because let's face it, apart from the way you speak, which is still amazing, to become very educated in STEM subjects is incredible with someone's dyslexia. So how did you harness that to become
Well, I actually have quite a similar story to you. I did ballet, and because of my dyspraxia, I have fine motor coordination, that's okay, but my gross motor coordination is not good. And I did my ballet pre-primary like 4 times. Because I was so determined to do it. And my mum said, why are you doing this? And I kept doing it. And that's kind of that thing of when I decide to do something, it's given me that power to go, no, I'm going to try again. I know I can do it. I just got to keep trying. I'm gonna do it. And you know, even when I've been physically, mentally at breaking point, I found something within myself from all of those really, you know, unsupportive teachers that I've come across. And I kind of set myself the hardest thing I could think of, which was I'm going to do natural sciences at Clare College, Cambridge. That's what I'm going to apply for. That because it's the most competitive course, and Clare's one of the more competitive colleges. I don't know what on earth I was thinking. Like, looking back, that course could have destroyed me. The workload, you know, even with any assistive technology, I think it would have been too much for me. And moving away from home, I'm much happier in London. But it was that kind of voices in the back of my head of teachers who go, no, you couldn't do that. And just imagining, you know, telling them, I did get an offer to go there. And it was my first choice, but I was working so hard during my A-levels, and my teachers had missed lots of my teaching, and we were the first of this new cohort. So I had to teach myself most of my A-levels. And unfortunately, being dyslexic and the main resource being a textbook, that held me back a bit. So I got, you know, I still got A's, which is great, but, you know, it's not the 2 A stars I needed to get that Cambridge offer.
Yeah.
And it came to, you know, it all came to this kind of breaking point. I'd pushed myself. This had been my ultimate goal, to finish school and end up at this incredibly competitive course at a competitive university and be able to tell, you know, my year 1 teacher, yeah, I did that. You know, I'm not slow.
Yeah.
But actually there comes a point where it's like, well, especially with university, is you want to enjoy the whole experience. And I think that course, I wouldn't have had time to enjoy everything. Like, you know, now I'm doing art society.
So what do you do in art society?
Oh, well, we do anything to do with art, basically. I mean, you know,
no, I mean, what do you do in art society?
This year I'm president.
Wow.
But previously, you know, I've just attended as a member and helped afterwards cleaning up and that kind of thing, because I like the committee members. And I wouldn't have had time for that at this other course. So in terms of my well-being, I'm so happy with where I've ended up.
It was inspiring to hear how determined Mirabel was to get into her course and succeed in school. But I'm even more impressed with where she is now. She seemed to have found a really healthy work-life balance, which could be so challenging to find, especially someone at her age. For so many dyslexics, organisation is one of their biggest challenges. I was fascinated to learn more about how Mirabel stays organised enough to maintain all her commitments. I figured I could probably learn a thing or two. Check this out. So are you good at organisation and things like that? Because every dyslexic person is completely different, and I do wonder whether there's something in your being slightly on the spectrum and dyslexia that counteract each other in certain ways. Because I've spoken to a few people and they do say, because some aspects of being on the spectrum makes you excel in certain areas as well, and I wonder if they kind of where that sits. So are you good at organisation skills? Is that kind of your bag? I'm
not naturally good at it. I'd say my thing is that I've been very good at coming up with coping strategies. So sometimes when things ramp up a level, I already know how to cope with it. Whereas my peers maybe haven't come across that issue before. Yeah. And they don't have those coping mechanisms in place. So for most things, I think that's the autism thing, is you like to put things into systems and categorize things. So that does help me with organization, is that I try to streamline that stuff and I, you know, bullet point things. But I'm really forgetful. So I'm very reliant on reminders on my phone. For Art Society, running my committee, I have a Microsoft Teams thing, and I make sure that everyone's been assigned their tasks, because I can't remember to remind people manually. Yeah. So it's more that my autism helps me come up with systems. I'm very good at thinking about stuff in terms of a system and a workflow and how things impact and cascade. And it also makes me quite detail orientated. But I still really struggle. It's something I have to really be conscious with.
It's an interesting combination of the two, because generally I ever speak to people who autistic, or I speak to people who are dyslexic, and you're the first person I've spoken to that has both. And I think it's interesting how they both can kind of counteract each other.
Yeah.
That must be a minefield to get around.
Yeah, and for a while after my autism diagnosis, because that was when I started university.
And when you started university was when you started, right, okay.
I had a suspicion kind of my whole life. We'd kind of joke about it. We'd be like, oh, you're so autistic, you know. But then I was like, actually, you know what? I think I genuinely am.
Yeah.
And I went to a doctor and got the diagnosis, and it was like pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's also because women tend to socially mask a lot of the kind of textbook symptoms of being on the spectrum. And it's just, you know, so I was kind of like, after that, I was like, oh, which is from what diagnosis?
Yeah.
And I also had a bout of depression because just a whole adjustment experience, and I'd been really working so hard for so long. During my first year of university, I did have to interrupt my studies. And I got obsessed with like what was from what diagnosis. But then I realized I'm not a diagnosis, I'm a person.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter.
I was about to say, it sounded like you need to get out your own head, which is actually what I mean. We all struggle. We all have this issue, and I think with the way life works now, we're told to worry a lot more than we probably should about a lot of things. But when you're getting told these sort of things, you would naturally want to worry about them.
Yeah.
But you must have dedicated your life up to date to pretty much studying.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, school was my world, definitely, until I left school. I had very little outside perspective. And it really, you know, when I did badly at school, it was like the end of the world. I didn't have that kind of distance to be able to say, oh, you know what, no one cares about your GCSEs after you leave. You know?
I tell people that all the time, and their parents want to kill me.
Yeah,
it's really bad to say, and no, it is. I always say this. I used to teach karate classes, and I always said, your GCSEs is to get into college, your A levels is to get into university, and then your university is to get a degree, to get a job.
Yeah,
but you can just leave school and get a job. You don't have to worry. You know, everyone's journey is different. And also, I mean, it's different now. You have to stay in school till you're 18 but I left school and started work at 16. So when people I knew come out of university at, 22, 23, I had been working for so many years that I'd already moved so far up the ladder. And I think they come in and it's like, you don't need to have this academic background. But if you do, make sure it's in the right subject, like you.
Yeah.
So this is what I said, because I went back to university to do civil engineering. I was a mature student, which I loved, because when you leave school and you don't know what you're going to do, a lot of people just pick any subject that they think is going to work. Whereas I got to go back and study the subject that I loved. And I think that a lot more people should probably do that.
Yeah.
And I was ready to learn more.
I always say to people, because I act as a big sister to pretty much all of my younger brother's friends and all the various people I tutor. And I always say, just take a gap year, because it's such a shock to the system. You know, give yourself time. If you're not ready, don't force yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you've got all the time in the world. You've got your whole life. You know, you don't have to, you're not falling behind if you take a gap year, apply with your results, take some time to understand what course you're doing. So a girl at the moment I know, she applied for English. She suddenly realised, she looked at the course and thought, oh, I don't want to read any of those books. I'm not interested in Old English. No. So then she applied for psychology. I was like, but you're not, no offence or anything, but your chemistry is not good. The neuroscience content in psychology might be too difficult for you. It's not what you're most interested in. I know you well. You know, maybe you should consider anthropology, because that's one of those subjects that you don't really get to hear about until you've left school. And actually, it's exactly what she wants to do, because it combines the kind of analysis of texts, which is why she wanted to do English, with the kind of psychology and motivation of, you know, what is it like to be human, which she was going to be looking at with the psychology. But there isn't time to work out that when you're in sixth form and, you know, you're being told, oh, your A-levels are so soon.
But I don't know. I know 50-year-olds that don't know what they're doing in life. This is what makes me laugh. Parents, but adults tell younger people to make decisions on their life, and you don't know what you want to do.
I always say that you shouldn't restrict yourself to just thinking, I need to go to university, because actually that pressure, and I'm saying all the time that things like apprenticeships should be more respected and more championed, and that foundation years, you know, there's so much stigma that you didn't just go straight in.
Yeah.
What's the issue? Spending a year, you know, adjusting and taking your time and, you know, going over some basic concepts, because, you know, if your foundations aren't strong, you know, they might end up dropping out later on. You know, I would far prefer to have done a foundation and then gone into a course, or, you know, done extra BTECs or whatever and ended up in the right place than have shotgunned off into something and burnt out. I mean, I'm always telling people it doesn't really matter how you get there. It's just you've got to work out what it is you really want, and then think about the way that suits you to get there.
School was clearly really important to Mirabel, and it's interesting to see how she's gradually withdrawn from that outlook. For me, my world wasn't in the classroom, but actually everything outside of it. Neither of us was able to have both, and it really makes you wonder why British dyslexics in schools can't have both. I wanted to find out more about Mirabel's plans for the future, her dream job, and her advice to dyslexic kids. I asked Mirabel what she would say to parents that are worried their children might have dyslexia. So what would you say to maybe the parents listening? Because I think a lot of the time is people with dyslexia like us, we just live it, so it makes it's kind of irrelevant to us. We try and live for it and do it, but no matter what happens, we're still going to be in it. Whereas for parents, it's very different. So for you, we briefly spoke before we started, and your mum is an absolute superhero.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. She needs her own podcast herself. That is up. And she done some amazing things for you. And for what would you say for some of the parents listening that's sitting there worried? Because we're not parents. I'm not a parent. I assume you're not a parent at 21.
You would have anytime soon.
Right. And I would have said exactly the same at 21. But I think the parents worry a lot. From the ones I speak to, it's like their unbelievable fear. And I think that's what we need to try and get over. So what would your from a daughter who's got a super mum who done things the right way, what would your advice be in that?
So I think noticing that your child has a difficulty and acting on it, because the friends of mine who have had diagnoses earlier on have had much better outcomes. The friends of mine whose parents have kind of left it a bit later, and this goes for most kind of neurodivergence. I'm talking about friends who've had dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism. So, I mean, everyone benefits from having that understanding of themselves and being told it's okay. It's fine. Made by Dyslexia, they say that 1 in 5 people is dyslexic. That's the stat that they always use.
What would you say to, we've done the parents now, what would you say to someone who's, let's say you're 21, say people 16, they're coming to the end, 15, 16, they're coming to the end of their education, their first part of their education.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
So, I mean, generally I'd say, you know, just work out the best strategies for you to cope with your time management, because that is a skill. No matter where you end up, you're going to need to know how to manage your time and how to know your limits. Yeah. Because I'm not, you know, although I really enjoyed studying Latin A level, I knew I couldn't spend 3 years studying in-depth classics because that was too much for me. And I'm not saying that, you know, you can't do a literary subject as a dyslexic. What I'm saying is you need to work out what you enjoy and then are prepared to overcome those difficulties for. So if, there's still a lot of reading involved with a chemistry degree, but I can deal with it, and I can deal with that kind of level of difficulty because I enjoy the subject so much. So it's knowing what you are prepared to put into something and understanding, is it worth the work for what you're going to get out of it?
Yeah.
You know, do you really want to do a degree in this thing because you've been told you need a degree?
Yeah.
Do you really want to do that extra A-level subject? Maybe you should just do 3 because that's what's normal. You don't have to take on 4 because you can. You know, it's fine to say, no, I'm going to stick with this.
So we've spoken about your younger life, even though it's still there. We've spoken about now. Mm-hmm. What's the big plans for you?
Well, I do like kind of planning ahead is how I motivate myself.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be interested in this 20-point plan.
So, I mean, I'm constantly trying to do stuff I love doing this volunteer tutoring, but equally it works for my CV. I'm gaining experience. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a connected learning internship. I've done a lot of internships in education and stuff because I care about it, but I don't want to be a teacher.
I was just going to ask, are you going to be a teacher?
But I do care about inspiring people. Mm-hmm. So I would like at some point maybe to end up in some kind of science communication role. Mm-hmm. Like Prof. Andrea Sella, who is in our department, often does stuff for the BBC and that kind of thing. And his radio series is really on the elements. It's a really good listen.
Well, so STEM, from an engineer, STEM subjects are really trying to promote getting more women into being the talking point of it now. Anyway, trying to entice more women into STEM subjects because they are really lacking. Although saying that, I always say engineering's not nearly, most of my staff are women because this is another bad thing for me to say, but I'm going to say it is, I found women are more attention to detail at work, and my female engineers seem to outstrip my male engineers regularly, but that's because I think just the different methodology, the way they think.
I mean, chemistry is pretty much 50-50 at an undergraduate level. It's when you look at academia further up, so if you look at the professorial level, then it's 90% male. Yeah. So it's more about kind of retaining and not losing at each level for chemistry. But STEM in general, I mean, there are so many incentives as a woman to go into engineering. I almost did it, even though it wasn't something I really enjoyed. I did an engineering project during sixth form because I took on too much. I tend to sign up for too much. And I realised I really can't go into engineering. I hate it. I hate these numbers. No, thank you. And that was a real wake-up call, and I'm so glad I did that project. Yeah. But the kind of... So what I kind of want to end up doing is I'm really interested in materials. So I'm on an integrated master's at the moment, and I plan to take a year off after that. Because when I interrupted my studies... What are you going to do on your year off? I'm definitely going to travel. I visited Japan during my interruption for a month, and that was amazing. I'm quite an independent person. I don't mind going to stuff alone. I spent that whole month by myself in Japan. And so I want to kind of study and work. And I still love wildlife. I'm still that David Attenborough nerd. So I'd love to, see some wildlife and, maybe see an elephant in the wild or something, that would be amazing. But then I definitely want to do a PhD because I really want to have a chance to do my own research. Because when I was thinking about careers, when I was kind of 16, they kind of said, think about, what would you not mind doing all the time? If you had to just be stuck somewhere. We were doing this career survey, do you want to work outside? I was like, not really bothered. Do you want to work in this environment? And I realized I would be so happy just being in a lab all day. I'd be fine. I would be so pleased. I love being in the lab.
And I think that's a key takeaway from what I try to, when I mentor people, about doing what you love. And I regularly say this, I love engineering. And if I'm honest, it's probably one of my weaker sides of my businesses. it doesn't do as well as my other businesses, but I have such an unbelievable passion for it that I just have to do it. And I think what I always tell people is you have to find whoever told you that, that's not the sort of advice I got at school, which is great that you got that. You have to wake up every day wanting to do something. I mean, look at the guy that invented the GoPro. He was a surfer, a skateboarder, he'd done everything, and all he wanted was a camera he could take anywhere that wasn't big, and it would just make his life a lot easier. Well, I don't even know what that company's worth now, 2-3 billion, something stupid
just
like
know
that.
The cameras are expensive.
Exactly. But this was one guy, and
Yeah.
I bet you when he was learning to skateboard, people were probably going, what are you doing that for? It's like, I love this. I use this example to older people all the time. Playing computer games, everyone said, you're never going to make any money from that. How wrong are they now?
I know.
It's one of the biggest growing industries out there. It's unbelievable. And everyone always says things, you're never going to make money out of doing that. You will. If you care about it enough, you will.
You'll find a way. I mean, I always had quite flexible flexible careers and role models because not just my mum, you know, going from being a set painter to becoming my personal dyslexia assistant to now being a medical legal paralegal. You know, she found out, you know, she quite enjoyed prey-seeing backgrounds and stuff and was very good at it. So she made that into her business. Yeah. But my dad also, he started out as a surgeon. When I was 8, he decided, surgery is not for me. I'm going to be a psychiatrist. So it was still medicine, but he had to completely retrain.
That's that's a big jump.
Yeah. And he'd always found that more interesting, but he'd felt pressured that because he had the ability to do, he was good at surgery, he felt that he had to do it because it was like his duty. So it was a very stressful career, many Christmases lost, you know. He got a key to the City of London thing, a freedman of the City of London.
Oh, so he's a livery.
So he's allowed to drive his geese across the bridge and that kind of thing. My
friend's a livery person. He says the same, and I was like, only people who have this can do that. And I was like, who was it geese or sheep or something? And I was like, who's gonna? But yeah, great. Yeah,
because he did surgery on someone who'd been shot and put his hand in, just kind of plugged up the hole and did surgery on the floor, you know, and saved this guy's life. And so he was really good at it, but in terms of his well-being, it really, really ate away at him. And, you know, stuff like, because of budgeting, you know, some guy really wanted to keep his knee during an amputation, and the budget was you have to do an above-the-knee amputation. That kind of thing he just couldn't live with. And he just hated the kind of brutality of it. So he'd always been more interested in patient welfare and like almost emotional welfare. And he just decided, I've had enough. I'm going to change to psychiatry. And now, you know, he really loves it. He really enjoys it.
Last advice, if you can give one, if you were standing on a stage with 1,000 students now, what would be with dyslexia, what would be your advice to them?
Just take it easy. Don't punish yourself. Relax. You got it. You know, it's going to be fine. It all works out. Just don't panic.
That's great. And mine would be, you can do anything. If people wanted to find you, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty much the only Mirabel Brow out there. It's quite helpful having a unique name. So yeah.
I've met a few Mirabels.
Yeah, but having that spelling of Mirabel and Brow, I haven't found another one so far.
I'll set up a private account and do it. Okay. Thank you for coming on. It's been great.
Thank you.
Talking to someone that's gone through what I have, but has had totally different experiences, has left a lasting impression on me. I think Mirabel is so inspiring for dyslexics everywhere, having achieved so much at just the age of 21. It really shows dyslexics of any age can really thrive as academics. Mirabel is walking, talking proof. With the right support and motivation, anyone can achieve whatever they want. Mirabel, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I look forward to following your journey over the coming years, as I know you're going to use your invisible gift to achieve great things. Coming up on next week's episode, I speak to the phenomenal entrepreneur, Donnelly. We talk about our different upbringings, how he's overcome dyslexia through his work, and I learn about how he's built one of the UK's leading marketing agencies. Just a couple of quick notes before we go, they're important ones. First off, make sure to subscribe to The Invisible Gift wherever you listen to podcasts so you can automatically be notified about new episodes. One thing that's really important to me is to hear what you guys think about the podcast. I want to hear more about the challenges you're facing, what you're trying to change in your own life, work and family, and hear your inspiring stories of how you've overcome the odds to achieve the incredible. I know because so many of you are dyslexic that asking you to write something to me is not going to work. So I've worked with the production team on The Invisible Gift and we've come up with an idea. Grab your phone and record us a voice note. If you've got an iPhone, use voice memos. On Android, the options are endless. Once you're happy with your message, you can email it to me. My email address is andrew@theinvisiblegift.com. I would love to start sharing some of your audio notes and stories in future episodes. Also, and I'm really excited about this, head to theinvisiblegift.com because that way you can see the amazing artwork that has been commissioned to go along with each episode this season and also find out more about each of the guests I've had the pleasure of speaking to on the podcast. If all of this is way too much for you, I get it. I'm starting a newsletter that includes all this and more, and it will come straight to your inbox. It's so simple to sign up at theinvisiblegift.com. You've been listening to the Invisible Gift podcast presented by me, Andrew Kitley, and produced by One Fine Play. This episode was recorded by Kazra. From One Fine Play, James Bishop is the executive producer. Kazra is the audio and visual engineer. Connor Foley is the editorial producer and researcher. Special thanks to Christina, Izzy, and the Cube Studios. Thank you for listening to the Invisible Gift podcast.